Hello, everyone. It is my first official launch week as an author. I am so excited to bring my book Baby out into the world. It's called, as you can see, More Than Your Mountains. It's a children's picture book for kids who have chronic illnesses. Now, you might be wondering, how would I know what to write? How do I know the world that children live in when they have a chronic illness? Well, I wanted to share with you why I know that, and therefore why I felt compelled to write this book for kids who don't have it very easy, but are the most resilient and bravest kids on this planet. So, when I was born, I weighed 4 pounds and 9 ounces, despite being a full-term baby. And I didn't really look quite developed. My dad said it just kind of looked like you needed to go back in the womb and bake a little bit longer. I had club feet and dislocated hips, which was bizarre too because I was a C-section baby. Just didn't really make sense at all. But nevertheless, just kept living and, just took it one day at a time. And then eventually I started having just frequent ear infections, pneumonia, chronic sinusitis, just over and over and over. And I looked like that classic allergy baby with the dark rings under my eyes. It just didn't make sense, but my pediatricians just chalked it up to, some kids, they take a little bit longer to build up their immune system. And it looks like Whitney is one of those children. So just went with it, and, my parents hoped, okay, eventually she will grow out of this. But that was not the case. When I was 6 years old, I woke up one morning with excruciating pain in my knees. I could not walk for about an hour. My parents tried everything to get me up, to move my legs. It just wasn't happening. They were hot, they were swollen. I was a mess. So eventually I could walk, but it wasn't without a severe limp. And then the next day, I spiked a fever of 105. So obviously, my parents took me to the ER, and the fellow pediatrician on call made arrangements for me to go to Cincinnati Children's to be evaluated. And I was diagnosed with septic arthritis in my knees. They treated me with naproxen, and it did wonders. Actually, my rheumatologist at Cincinnati Children's joked, if all my patients responded this well to naproxen, I'd be out of a job. Unfortunately, even though that was treated and I responded well to it, my doctor saw that something else much bigger was going on. My labs were all over the place. What wasn't supposed to be high was high. What wasn't supposed to be low was low. And another very bizarre thing is I had a severely enlarged spleen. So your spleen's supposed to sit up in your left rib cage. Mine came out down to my hip bone, over to my belly button. And it actually was, at that time, the biggest spleen that they ever felt. I had fellows, interns, attendings lined up at my hospital door saying, we're told we may never fill a spleen like that again. So we want to fill it. Do you care if we fill it? So I thought about charging $0.25 for every doctor that came in, but didn't do that. So anyway, doctor's appointments, tests, procedures, years and years down the road, they were able to give me a very broad diagnosis of autoimmune hemolytic anemia, complicated by combined immune deficiencies, which meant they didn't know what they were dealing with. They tested me for things like lupus, CF, cancer, MS. And while we could celebrate that I did not have any of those illnesses, it was still a mystery. So, my treatment was trial and error at best, but thankfully my doctors were amazing. God just put the right team into my life who just have gone above and beyond for me. I transitioned from Cincinnati Children's to Nationwide Children's 22 years ago, back when it was called Columbus Children's Hospital. And from there, God just, put the perfect team. I truly believe that He ordained my doctors and had them in mind even before I existed. And because they get me, they have just an intuition about what works well. I'm not a science experiment to them. They want to do what will cause the least harm. So it was a while trying to figure out what worked. First, it was high doses of steroids, and then eventually transitioned years later to what I am doing now, which is a sub-Q form of IVIG and a biologic called rituximab. So anyway, eventually we got there, thanks to my hematologist, Dr. Olszewski, my immunologist, and my rheumatologist, Dr. Ardwin. But one thing that you might not know is when you have a chronic illness, you don't just deal with the medical and physical side of it. The emotional and mental components are there too, and it's very, very draining because you're missing out on memories and milestones that make life precious. And when you have a disease that's mainly invisible, people question your authenticity. And okay, is she just trying to get ahead? Is she trying to milk this for all it's worth and get people to hand stuff to her? I face that a lot. From close friends, from peers in school, and even teachers. And it was tough because what they didn't see behind the scenes is how much it took out of me just to do the smallest, simplest task. And when I felt good to do something, they didn't see that, I had to rest and work hard to be able to do that thing that they could do with the least bit of effort. And, it was difficult, Now looking back, I wish they would have asked me, we don't understand this. We don't get what you're going through. Can you tell us so we understand it? And, I had an IUP in school, and that helped tremendously. I missed anywhere from 75 to 100 days of school a year. I had a tutor who helped me when I was not in school. But my parents felt strongly that when I felt good enough to go to school, they wanted me in school. Just so I could have a life outside of doctor's appointments and, being home and laying on the couch all the time. And so that was hard because of what I faced. But I understand it now. If I didn't go through that, I wouldn't have developed the empathy and compassion and, understanding that I have now. It was fostered through those ashes. I had to go through those ashes to get to the beauty. And so, the things that I talk about in my book, I experienced all of this. I experienced the kids who say mean things. I experienced the, long uncertain days and, the scary hospital stays and those really annoying CAT scans and MRIs, they don't hurt, but if you're claustrophobic like me, it's terrifying. And, not knowing what I had, I didn't know when I could potentially leave this earth because I was so sick. And so it was a scary time, but I know God put everything together to get me to where I am now today. And so I'm so grateful. I don't want to give away too much about how I got here today because that's in another book. But I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey so you understand that this isn't just me doing research and, talking to people. I lived this book. And therefore, I want to encourage kids and, let them know that they're more than their disease. And despite that disease, God has an amazing and wonderful purpose for them. So do not listen to the people who tell you you can't because of your disease. I faced that a lot. People not thinking that I could do something because they viewed me as a little bit helpless and not capable of going for my dreams because of my disease. And if I would have listened to that, I wouldn't have been here today speaking to you and sharing my first ever book. The days can be hard. I get that. Some days, people don't understand. They see that you were sick one day, and then this next day you're able to do this. And what they don't see is that you don't control when you feel good. So when you feel good as someone who has a chronic illness, you have to go for those things so you can have memories and milestones as well. And, we don't have as many as, healthy people. But the awesome part is, even though we don't have as many of those normal milestones, normal, what society deems normal, there's still so much joy. And there's things that we are able to experience that we wouldn't have been able to experience if we didn't have our story and if we didn't have this mountain to climb as children and even adults with chronic illnesses. And so anyway, if you're a child who's watching this, who has a chronic illness, I just want you to know, I understand. I see you. You are victorious, and you are more.